The Montreal Screwjob. We start off with perhaps the most infamous and notorious off-script moment in WWE history. At Survivor Series 1997, Bret Hart was set to defend his WWF title against Shawn Michaels in front of his home crowd of Montreal. But this wasn't just any match. It was one of the most intense rivalries at the time, as the two hated each other in real life as well. Bret Hart, who had been in WWF for 13 years, was arguably the company's most popular superstar. But just a week before Survivor Series, he had agreed to join the rival company, WCW. This means his bout with Shawn Michaels was about to be his last, and he was unwilling to drop the title in front of his home crowd. Vince had promised that the match would end in a disqualification, but that's not what happened. Midway through the match, Shawn locked Bret in his own finishing move, the sharpshooter. Bret hadn't submitted, but suddenly the bell rang and Shawn Michaels was declared the new champion. Bret sat in the ring, stunned and furious, while the crowd gasped in shock. What they didn't know was that Vince McMahon had secretly ordered the referee to end the match, screwing Bret out of the title without his consent. In the aftermath, a furious Bret approached the apron where Vince was standing and spat directly into his face. But it didn't end there. He also smashed cameras, monitors, and ringside equipment to vent his frustration. Before leaving, Bret even gestured WCW in the air, making it clear where he was going. The fallout was massive as the fans turned on WWE while Vince McMahon transitioned into a villainous role. The Undertaker versus Goldberg. In 2019, WWE hosted the Super Showdown pay-per-view in Saudi Arabia, booking a dream match between their biggest superstars, Goldberg and The Undertaker. But what should have been a legendary showdown turned into one of the worst, most dangerous moments that WWE has ever broadcast. The crazy thing is that it all started with a single botch. Early in the match, Goldberg slammed his head into the ring post and suffered an actual concussion. From that moment on, he was completely disoriented, but instead of stopping the match or adjusting the pace, they kept going. Goldberg attempted moves that required timing and coordination, which he no longer had. He nearly dropped The Undertaker on his neck in a failed jackhammer and later collapsed while trying to lift him again. Taker was visibly frustrated and confused, and he didn't know what to do throughout most of the match. He eventually finished the match with a weak-looking tombstone and pinned Goldberg just to get it over with. After the bell, The Undertaker rolled out of the ring without celebrating, still annoyed by what just happened. But several years later in a podcast, he did confirm that it was no one's fault. Royal Rumble 2005. The ending of the 2005 Royal Rumble was supposed to be simple. Batista wins by tossing John Cena over the top rope. But when the final spot came, things went completely off script. Due to a botched move, both men tumbled over the ropes at the exact same time, and their feet hit the floor together. It wasn't planned, but it happened. This left the officials with no exact winner to announce. Referees from both Raw and SmackDown brands started arguing over who touched first, clearly buying time and waiting for instructions. Backstage, Vince McMahon was fuming. He marched to the ring to fix the chaos, but as he slid in, he tore both of his quads. No joke. He literally sat on the mat, unable to stand, and barked orders at the referees on what to do next. During this time, the cameras focused on the two wrestlers who actually improvised by throwing each other out to divert attention. Eventually, Vince decided to restart the match, and Batista ended up winning rather quickly. A big disaster was averted, but Vince McMahon quickly became an internet meme. Brock Lesnar versus Braun Strowman. This incident also took place in the Royal Rumble, but in the 2018 edition. During a triple threat match for the WWE Universal Championship, Braun Strowman accidentally kneed Brock Lesnar too hard in the head. It was a painful blow that took the animal by complete surprise. Brock didn't take it lightly. Instead of selling it like a pro, he fired back with a real punch that rattled Braun's skull. The funny thing is that the third participant, Kane, simply watched this from the sidelines with amusement. The match slowed down from that point onwards, and Brock Lesnar ended up winning. Although no real damage was done, the entire roster learned firsthand what happens when you hit a legit MMA fighter. Steve Austin versus Owen Hart. 1997 was a really chaotic year for wrestling fans. In addition to the Montreal Screwjob, another off-script moment occurred that nearly ended one of the biggest careers in WWE history. Steve Austin was wrestling Owen Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. They had planned a spot where Owen would deliver a sit-down tombstone piledriver. But instead of landing safely on his knees, Owen landed in a seated position, which caused Austin's head to absorb the full impact. The crowd didn't know what had happened, but Austin immediately collapsed. He was paralyzed and couldn't move his body for several minutes. When Owen got to know of this, he started trash-talking to buy time, and even the referee didn't intervene. Thankfully, Austin somehow managed to crawl using his hands and performed the weakest roll-up in WWE history to win the match. This wasn't the way the match was supposed to end, but it is the best he could have done. In the aftermath, Austin was diagnosed with a serious neck injury that would affect him for the rest of his career and eventually lead to his early retirement. Owen and Austin were reportedly never close again after that, since Austin was furious about the botched move and felt Owen never properly apologized. Years later in an interview, Austin revealed that he couldn't feel his body for several terrifying minutes. He could have panicked and stopped the match then and there, but he instead remained calm and finished the match off like a professional. Batista versus Booker T. Although not an official match, this incident created so much drama that it had to be here. During a commercial shoot for SummerSlam in 2006, the two got into a legit fight which resulted in both getting some serious injuries. This was a time when Batista was at his peak and one of the biggest stars in the business. It is reported that he disrespected many wrestlers and was being too cocky, which got on Booker's nerves. According to several wrestlers who were present during the fight, Booker T emerged victorious, but guys like Finlay claim Batista was more dominant. Regardless, one thing's for sure that both of them took an absolute beating. Booker T was left with a black eye while Batista was pretty banged up himself. Although the commercial never aired live on TV, the news quickly circulated online and people became aware of the heated rivalry. The two faced off against each other in the ring several months later, where they remained professional for most moments. But there were times when their aggression spilled over, and Batista even botched his powerbomb out of frustration. However, despite the severity of the incident, time healed everything, and Booker T recently said in a podcast that he would hug Batista if they met, and that he was proud of his Hollywood success. The WrestleMania Diva incident. This surely has to be the wildest off-script moments in women's wrestling history. At WrestleMania 22, Mickie James, who was portraying an obsessed superfan-turned-creep gimmick, faced off against Trish Stratus for the Women's Championship. The storyline was already edgy, but nobody expected what happened during the actual match. At one point, Mickie suddenly reached out and grabbed Trish in a very inappropriate way, right between the legs. As if that wasn't enough, she followed it up with a very lewd gesture. This left the crowd gasping in shock while the commentators were unsure what to say. That spot was not approved by WWE at all, and Mickie later admitted that she just got caught up in the moment and made a really bad call. Vince McMahon was furious backstage and let her know immediately. To make matters more awkward, WWE edited the gesture out of all future replays and DVD releases. But despite the backlash, fans still talk about that match to this day. Hulk Hogan versus Shawn Michaels. Now, this one is legendary, not just for the match, but for the drama that came with it. At SummerSlam 2005, fans were treated to a dream matchup between Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan. But despite it being an iconic bout on paper, there was a lot of chaos behind the scenes. Shawn had pitched the idea of doing a 3-match series where both guys could win one each and keep the story going. But Hogan wasn't having it. He wanted one clean match that would result in his victory. Shawn's ego took a hit, and as a result, he retaliated in the most comical way possible. Throughout the match, he started selling Hogan's moves like he was being hit by a truck. A simple punch would send him flying across the ring. A clothesline had him flipping like a cartoon character, and at point Shawn tossed himself inside the ring without Hogan even touching him. The match was honestly hilarious, but it wasn't part of the script. This was Shawn's way of trolling Hulk Hogan on live TV. Becky Lynch's busted nose. During a 2018 Monday Night Raw episode, all hell broke loose when the Divas of SmackDown attacked their Raw counterparts. Superstars like Bayley, Ronda Rousey, Charlotte, and many others were battering each other for supremacy. But during the chaos, Nia Jax stole the headlines when she accidentally caught Becky Lynch with a brutal punch to the face. It wasn't part of the plan, but Becky's nose broke and she started bleeding right there on live TV. Despite the incident, Becky showed her badassery by continuing to fight like a champ. That raw, real moment helped turn her into the Man, one of WWE's most beloved and unstoppable stars. So, in short, that busted nose was actually a blessing in disguise for Becky Lynch's career. R-Truth's accidental US title win. R-Truth's character has always been delusional and funny. This is the same guy who once entered the Women's Royal Rumble thinking it was the men's. R-Truth is also infamous for that period when he used to seriously forget stuff. But while those were part of the storyline, his match against Shinsuke Nakamura for the United States title in 2019 went completely off script. The two battled it out in a really average match, but the finish didn't go as planned. R-Truth pinned Nakamura in a quick roll-up that caught everyone by surprise. The referee counted 3 in his usual pace before Nakamura could kick out. This led to a sudden title change that nobody had expected, and even R-Truth seemed genuinely shocked. For many years, fans were confused as to whether it was a botch or a rehearsed plot, but in a 2025 interview, R-Truth revealed that while he was set to eventually win the match, the roll-up count was completely accidental. Jericho's quick thinking. During a 2016 Raw episode, Neville broke his ankle during a routine slide in a match against Chris Jericho. He attempted to continue but was clearly in pain and soon collapsed to the ground. When Jericho noticed that something was wrong, he decided to ditch the planned finish and went for a quick roll-up to end the match. However, referee Charles Robinson didn't catch on and hesitated to make the count. This left Jericho fuming, and he shoved the referee while repeatedly shouting, "He's hurt." That shove led to a disqualification, ending the match in the safest way possible. However, the two continued to exchange bitter words, with the referee even cursing at Jericho live on TV. Although the match ended in a bit of confusion, Jericho's main focus was making sure Neville didn't get hurt worse, and he did exactly that. The Undertaker versus Mankind. This has to be one of the most iconic matches in WWE history. Even to this day, that clip of Mankind being chucked from the top of a Hell in a Cell cage by The Undertaker is played before every live broadcast. It was a brutal match which contained everything: blood, stretchers, thumbtacks, and whatnot. The deadly fall was obviously planned, and it required a great deal of rehearsal. But what many people don't remember is that there was a second fall, which was completely unscripted and accidental. After Mankind recovered from the first fall and climbed back on top of the cage to face The Undertaker, they started trading blows again. But the dead man quickly gained the upper hand and choke-slammed Mankind on top of the cage, causing the roof to unexpectedly give away. Mankind fell straight down to the mat, and he was actually knocked out for a few moments. It looked like the match would be called off, and even The Undertaker waited patiently. But after medics and other officials tended to him, Mankind was somehow able to continue. The fight went on for over 10 more minutes until The Undertaker finally put him out of his misery with a tombstone piledriver. Drunk Jeff Hardy. Alright, this one's not from WWE, but we had to add it because of the bizarre incident and the fact that both wrestlers involved are famous for their time in WWE. At Victory Road 2011, fans were hyped for the main event match between Jeff Hardy and Sting for the TNA World title. But what they got instead was one of the most bizarre incidents in wrestling history. Hardy, who was struggling with addiction at the time, showed up to the arena clearly intoxicated. He was stumbling during his entrance, couldn't even stand straight in the ring, and looked totally out of it. Sting was ready to go, but the referee knew something was seriously wrong. You could even see him throwing up the X sign before the match even started, which usually means an injury. Eric Bischoff had to rush in last minute to change the match to a no disqualification type, giving Sting the absolute freedom to do whatever he wants. Soon after, the bell rang and Sting immediately hit his finisher. The intoxicated Hardy tried to kick out, but Sting held on and the match was over in just 88 seconds. In the aftermath, the angry crowd chanted "Bullst," to which Sting replied, "I agree." As for Hardy, he was immediately sent home and TNA had to later apologize for the incident. The Botched Glass. Now, this one's straight up brutal. At King of the Ring 2001, Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon faced off in a brutal no-holds-barred street fight. It was meant to be a wild, entertaining match, but ended up seriously injuring both players because of a stupid mistake. The plan was for Angle to suplex Shane through a glass panel on the stage. But here's the thing. The crew had accidentally used the wrong kind of glass. Instead of sugar glass, they used actual plexiglass, which is ridiculously hard to break. So when Angle tried to suplex Shane through it, nothing happened. Shane's body just bounced off it and he landed awkwardly head first. Instead of stopping, Angle kept going again and again. On about the third or fourth try, the glass finally shattered, but by then Shane had taken multiple nasty bumps straight to the concrete. His head was cut open and his body was clearly messed up. Even Angle injured his own tailbone while trying to throw Shane through the second pane. Years later in an interview, Angle admitted that he actually wanted to skip that glass part when it failed, but Shane urged him to smash him through it. Kurt eventually won the match, but Shane's professionalism and the glass botch completely stole the show. Brock Lesnar versus Hardcore Holly. We have the Beast Incarnate Brock Lesnar for the second time in this list. Back in 2002, Brock had just broken through the ranks and was relatively new. In an episode of SmackDown, he faced Hardcore Holly in what should have been a relatively standard match. But then they botched and Holly ended up breaking his neck. Let me explain slowly. During the bout, Brock went for a powerbomb, something he'd done dozens of times. But for some reason, Holly sandbagged it, meaning he didn't jump to help with the lift. Brock still managed to muscle him up, but without Holly's momentum, the move turned disastrous. Instead of landing flat on his back, Holly came down hard on his neck. After the incident, Holly immediately underwent a surgery and was out of action for over a year. Many fans believed that Brock did it on purpose, but Holly himself clarified that it was a mistake, and that Brock had already apologized to him 100 times. Alex Riley takes himself out of the match. 2011 was when The Miz was at his absolute peak. He was engaged in a heated rivalry with John Cena and was about to headline WrestleMania for the first time ever. At the 2011 Royal Rumble, The Miz was supposed to eliminate Cena with the help of his right-hand man, Alex Riley. But during a fairly routine spot in the corner of the ring, Riley lost his footing and accidentally fell out, eliminating himself from the match way earlier than expected. You can even see Cena and Kofi Kingston both scrambling to save him, but it was already too late. Eventually, they managed to get the job done when Riley distracted Cena from outside, allowing The Miz to eliminate him. But the incident left a lasting mark on Riley's career, and he never reached the same heights again. One of his biggest critics was John Cena, who questioned his ethics and professionalism. Count it, ref. Cameron's WWE career is remembered for all the wrong reasons. She came into the spotlight mainly because of the competition. Total divas, but in-ring, she looked like she had no clue what she was doing. One of the most cringeworthy incidents happened during a match with her former tag team partner Naomi. After knocking down her opponent, Cameron went for the pinfall. But here's the thing, Naomi was flat on her face, which isn't a legal pinning position. Cameron appeared confident and repeatedly shouted, "Count it, ref," but the confused referee replied, "Count what?" It was painfully clear that Cameron didn't fully understand how pinfalls worked, and the whole thing turned into an embarrassing, unforgettable moment. Even the commentators couldn't hold their laughter at what was happening. Following the incident, Cameron's momentum in WWE just disappeared. She was sent back down to developmental and was eventually released after several months of inactivity. And, oh yeah, she was the first contestant to be eliminated in Total Divas. Braun listening to the crowd. Now this is one of those rare unscripted moments that actually elevated everyone involved. Survivor Series 2017 was already a stacked show, but no one expected the ending to go the way it did. In the final moments of the men's elimination match, Triple H pulled off a sudden betrayal by hitting Kurt Angle with a pedigree. He then pinned him to win the match for Team Raw, and the crowd went silent. Braun Strowman, who had been booked as an unstoppable force all year, looked just as puzzled. But what happened next turned everything around. After a few tense seconds, Braun stared at Triple H and destroyed him with a running power slam, causing the arena to explode. All of this was planned, but what happened next was not. The fans immediately started chanting one more time, so in a rare moment, Triple H actually listened. He awkwardly stood up in a dazed way and Braun dropped him again. Even though no long-term feud came out of it, Braun became a fan favorite and his gimmick got a serious push. Batista fined for bleeding. When WWE transitioned to the PG era, it brought a strict no-blood policy that made wrestling a lot more boring and predictable. It also meant that the old-school wrestling traditions would become extinct. In late 2008, Batista and Chris Jericho faced off for the World Heavyweight Championship in a steel cage match, which had a planned script. But instead of sticking to it, the two decided to add more drama by having Batista cut himself during the match. The only problem was that this was done without Vince McMahon's approval. When the match aired with Batista bleeding like a stuffed pig, Vince McMahon was left fuming, and the other wrestlers were in complete shock. WWE had firmly committed to family-friendly programming, and the sight of blood directly contradicted the new rules. Vince immediately took action. He slapped Batista with a massive $100,000 fine for breaking the no-blading policy. Chris Jericho, referee Mike Chioda, and producer Dean Malenko were also fined, though their penalties were only $5,000. In the aftermath, Batista expressed shock at the severity of the fines. He even offered to cover for the others involved, as the idea had come from him. Although both the wrestlers didn't suffer any further consequences, the incident highlighted how strict Vince McMahon was about the PG guidelines. Edge's retirement. We end the list with perhaps the most emotional moment of all. In April 2011, Edge walked out to the ring in casual wear with a serious announcement to make. This wasn't one of those scripted or flashy promos, but just Edge telling everyone that he had to stop wrestling. Before that night, Edge had been experiencing numbness in his arms after WrestleMania. That was a big warning sign that something was seriously wrong. After some tests, doctors told him he had cervical spinal stenosis, which means the space around his spinal cord was shrinking and putting dangerous pressure on it. It was a life-threatening injury which could lead to paralysis or worse if he continued wrestling. What made it even tougher was that Edge already had major neck surgery years earlier. When he spoke on Raw, you could feel he was telling every word from his heart. He talked about how much wrestling meant to him and how painful it was to say goodbye to something he loves so much. The crowd was in complete shock and they remained silent during the entire speech. But once Edge was done, they gave him a standing ovation to honor the incredible legacy he had built over the years. Thankfully, after medical advancements and careful rehab, Edge made a shocking return in Royal Rumble 2020, nearly 9 years after his retirement. His return was welcomed by one of the most electrifying reactions WWE has ever seen.